Hello viewers, welcome to Top Notch TV. It's me, teacher Emis Njabani, a teacher of English and Literature, an examiner as well as an author. So this is a continuation of the session that we had earlier today on how to tackle paper 2, English paper 2. So in our earlier session, we looked at the first question, comprehension, and the second question, exact. And we say that the comprehension has 20 marks and the exact has 25 marks. So that is a total of 45 marks out of 80 marks that paper 2 carries. So we are going to look at the other two sections of paper 2 during this session. And the first one is question 3 of paper 2, and this question has 3 subsections. What do I mean? I mean that there are 3 areas that are examined in this question. So and there is no way that you can actually predict. It's not predictable, like we said for sure with the set books in the exam that this year, if they test the play, the next year will be a novel. So you can't actually say that you have you can be sure that this is what is going to come. So I advise our learners to revise thoroughly on all the 3 areas. So what are these 3 areas that are tested in paper 2? Question 3. The first one is poetry appreciation. And when I talk about poetry appreciation, I am talking about written poetry. So this is the written poetry. We have 2 types of poetry, our learners. We have written poetry and we have oral poetry. So when I talk about poetry appreciation, I mean the written poetry. So if you are presented a written poem, what kind of questions do you expect to find in that section? So the first question that you should expect or prepare on is the persona. So you were asked, who is the persona in the above poem? That question mostly carries 2 marks. So it is always good that after giving who the persona is, you go back to the poem and get a line that can be used to illustrate who the persona is. We also go the 3-step way. To be sure, remember I said in this paper, for you to score, don't be mean with information. Write as much as is required. Don't be mean. Don't be lazy when answering questions. So I advise students to take the 3-step way, where you identify who the persona is. For example, if it was a love poem, you can say the persona is a lover. If it is a poem in a setting where is at home, and maybe it's a child who is talking about their parent, then you can say that the persona is a child. That is identification. Then go ahead and explain using your own words. After you explain using your own words, pick a line from the poem that supports or backs up your explanation. That's what we mean by the 3-step way: identification, explanation, and illustration, where you lift a line to support your explanation. The second question that you would expect is the subject matter or the theme. This question, you're mostly asked, what is the subject matter of the poem, or what is the poem about? So if you're asked what is the poem about, it's always advisable that the first statement just state the theme. Say the poem is about theme, full stop. And now you explain. The poem is about education. This poem is about struggles in urban areas. The poem is about crime rate in the society. And then you go ahead and now explain. But in the explanation, note, our learners, when answering this question, you are expected to do 100% paraphrasing. You remember I explained what paraphrasing is. Paraphrasing is whereby you read the entire poem, you understand what the poem is about, and then you use your own words to now explain what the poem is about. Please do not use the words in the poem. Do not repeat lines from the poem. Do not even lift lines to back up your explanation in this question. It's not even required. You're supposed to do 100% paraphrasing. Read the poem as many times as possible. Get to know what it is talking about, and then you write that using your own words. So there's reason why most students don't score in this question, and remember this question mostly has 3 or 4 marks, is because they tend to use the words of the poet. There is no way you can explain what something is about by using the exact words you've been given. That is not answering the question. So 100% paraphrasing. Question number 3 is on features of style. You can be asked to identify and illustrate. You can also be asked to give effectiveness. So this one is just similar. The way you approach this question is similar to the way you approach it in the excerpt I explained earlier. So you identify, and then you illustrate if the question says so. Identify, illustrate, give effectiveness if the question says so, or if the question says you explain. Number 4 is on tone, mood, and attitude. Again, remember I mentioned about tone, mood, and attitude in question 1, tone, mood, and attitude in question 2, and now here we are again still talking about tone, mood, and attitude. So it means that this is an area that you need to thoroughly revise on as a student, because if you miss that question in the first section or the second section, definitely you won't miss it here. If it's not in the third question, definitely you won't miss it in the first or the second session. So it is always good to thoroughly prepare on this area, tone, mood, and attitude. Then the other one is comprehension questions. So you might be wondering, how does a comprehension question come in the poetry section? So I'll give an example using our top-notch English guru. So we have a poem on page 180, and the poem is titled Money Madness. So when you go to the questions, the first 2 questions are comprehension questions. They only require you to get to understand the poem, and then you answer the questions with the information that is in that particular poem. For example, why are people or the we so terrified of the collective money madness of mankind than money itself? That's an answer that is clearly on the poem. It's a comprehension question. The second one says, list the things that the persona mentions which ought to be for free. So you just need to read the poem, and then you can see that there are some things. For example, the persona says bread should be free, shelter should be free, fire should be free. And you see, so you have the 3 things that the persona mentions directly from the poem. That is what we call comprehension questions from the poem. Again, another question that I've talked about across all the sections is the meaning of words or lines. Now, since this is a poem, you can even be asked the meaning of a certain line from the poem. Remember, you stick to the do's and the don'ts that I gave you. Don't give alternatives. Don't give the answer in the to infinitive. Give the answer according to the word class in which the word given falls in. So those are the do's and the don'ts that we talked about in our first session. Remember, I said this question can have 3 subcategories. So the first one is written poem. The second one is oral poem. And the other one is oral narrative. So oral poem and oral narrative fall under oral literature. So what I'm saying, just to summarize, is that question 3 of paper 2, there are 3 areas that are tested. 1, written poetry. 2, oral poetry, also referred to as songs. And 3, oral narratives. The last 2 fall under oral literature. So I am going to combine the 2, oral poetry and oral literature, when it comes to the kind of questions you'd expect, because the questions are similar. So the first one, if you're presented with an oral narrative or an oral poem, be assured most likely you're going to be asked to classify the narrative given above, classify the oral poem that is given above. So you're supposed to know the type of songs that we have. You're supposed to know the type of narratives that we have. Just to mention about narratives, we only have 6 genres of oral narratives. That is tricksters, monster, legends, myths, etiological, and dilemma. Those are the 6 categories that are used to answer the classification question. Please do not say human tales, do not say fables, because generally those are general terms of classification. Human tales just means a story where human beings are characters. You can't do that because legends, we have human beings as characters. We can also have a dilemma story with human beings just a general description of narratives. So it's not an appropriate answer to give. Number 2, when you talk about etiological narratives, don't give the word explanatory to classify that story, because even myths are explanatory. They also explain the origin of a phenomenon. So it's also an explanatory, and also don't use the word why. So the right term to use is the term etiological narratives. Don't just write etiological dilemma. Write etiological narratives, dilemma narratives, trickster narratives, and so on. So that is classification. The same applies to the songs. Is it a dirge? Is it a wedding song, a love song, a praise song, or whatever it is? Classify and give an explanation as well as illustration. The 3-step way: classify, explain. It is a trickster because this character tricks this other character, and then you pick a line to support your explanation. Number 2, that question from this section is features of style. So you can be asked to identify features of style in the song, or features of style in the narrative, or what makes the above narrative an oral narrative. You're basically being asked about the features of oral narratives: opening formula, closing formula, timelessness, use of fantasy, all that. So go back to your notes and revise on features of narratives, features of oral songs, what makes a song an oral song and not a written poem. Number 3, is character traits. So you have a narrative. Maybe, for example, let's use the common narrative that we all know of, Hare and Hyena. So you're being asked, what is how would you describe Hare? What are the character traits of the hyena? Remember, we say that you use adjectives to describe people and describe things as well as animals. So stick to adjectives and also give a clear illustration. Another question is on economic activities, social activities, activities that bring people together, while socio-economic activities are activities that bring people together at the same time. It's a source of livelihood. I'll give examples. Economic activities, for example, we have like crop cultivation, we have livestock keeping, we have hunting, and so on, because those are activities that give a source of income to the community or people in the community. And remember, our learners, we don't write farming as an economic activity. Why? Because farming is a general term actually it's an umbrella term for both crop cultivation and livestock keeping. So if there is presence of livestock in the story, it is livestock keeping, not farming. If there is presence of things like wheat, maize, and so on, it is crop cultivation and not farming. Social activities are things like weddings. They bring people together in the society. Something like a burial ceremony, it also brings people together in the society. Socio-economic activities are activities that bring people together at the same time. They are making a source of livelihood from that activity. For example, trading. When you go to the market, you come together, you interact with members of your community. At the same time, you are also getting a source of income if you are a trader. That's what we mean by socio-economic activity. And please don't give, like for example, I don't know which word to use to actually categorize this, but there's some students who are asked identify the economic activity of the community from which this story originates or is set, and then someone says they are farmers. They are farmers is not an economic activity. You're supposed to say they the economic activity is crop cultivation. You can't say they are livestock keepers. No, you say it is livestock keeping. The next question that comes, that's I think now we are on question number 5, is on moral lesson. So you're asked to explain the moral lesson of the above story or the moral lesson of the above oral poem or song. One thing you should know that we use positive statements to give the moral lesson. It is not advisable to use a negative statement. So negative words like not automatically shows that your answer is wrong. Negative statements like never, no, once your answer is wrong. Always give the moral lesson using a positive statement. For example, we learn that we should be hardworking. Instead of saying we learn that we should not be lazy. So it means the same thing, but a student who writes, we learn that we should be hardworking, will score because his or hers is a positive statement. But a student who writes, we learn that we should not be lazy, will not score because theirs is a negative statement. That's what I mean by using positive or affirmative statements when answering a question on moral lesson. We also have comprehension questions. By now, you understand what I mean by comprehension questions. Questions that only are tied to the given passage or poem, and you only need to get the answer from the passage without you thinking outside the passage. Again, another question that I've been talking about, meaning of words. I say this question cuts across the first 3 questions. In the comprehension, you find it there. Excerpt, you find it there. And then narrative, oral poetry, written poetry, you still find it there. So practice, practice, practice. And then you will be perfect in that section. So we are coming to the end of our last section of paper 2. And this is the question that carries 15 marks, and it's grammar. Now, grammar is very wide. If you look at all the topics we have from Form 1 to Form 4, there are actually very many topics. But there are those topics that you know that are highly examinable. So we are going to look at some of them. Just mention a few that are highly examinable that you as a student, as a candidate preparing to sit for an exam, ought to have mastered before you sit for an exam. First of all, before we go to that, let's look at what makes students not score in the grammar section. The first one is not following the grammar rules. You have to ensure that all the grammar rules have been followed. By grammar rules, I mean, for example, punctuation. You can't write your statement and leave it without a full stop at the end. You will not score. You can't write a question tag and leave it without a question mark at the end. You will not score because that is a gross grammar error or grammatical error. You're supposed to punctuate your work well. Things like spelling, you misspell one word, the entire mark goes. Things like agreement, your subject must agree with the given verb, etc. Now, still on punctuation, I want to talk about capital letters. It is so sad that someone has a correct answer and then the mark just goes because they were not able to write or to shape their letters well. So there are those letters that do not change in form, whether it's in capital letter or small letter. So what matters in that case is the size. For example, if you look at the letter C, the letter S, they have the same shape or the same form, whether it's in the lowercase or the uppercase. So what matters is the size. So how do you know or how do you tell? For example, if your sentence starts with the pronoun she, how does the examiner tell that your S is a capital letter? They look at the size. And how does the size determine if it's a small letter or a capital letter? It has nothing to do with the size of your handwriting. It is compared to the next ascending letter. By ascending letter, I mean those letters that have a what? Are longer, like the H, B, D, those are ascending letters. So if the H, let me use the word stick. If the stick in the H is longer than the S in the word she, it is assumed the S is small s. So make sure you make your S bigger than any ascending letter in the same word. So the S should be bigger than the stick in the H. Again, look at the shape. The shape applies mostly for those letters that are different. For example, T, small t, or the T in the lowercase is different from a T in the uppercase. Still on punctuation, please dot the I's. If you have a word beginning with an I in the middle of the sentence, ensure the I is dotted. Otherwise, it's going to be considered a capital I. For example, you're writing the sentence and the answer is or the preposition in. Fill in the blank spaces using the most suitable simple prepositions. And the answer to that given statement or given question is in. Then you write I and N to fill in the blank space, and the I is not dotted. The mark will go. Please ensure you dot the I's that appear at the beginning of your answers, unless it comes at the beginning of the sentence or it is the first person pronoun I, because that is always written in capital letters. Also, learn to follow instructions. In grammar instructions, following instructions is key. If the question says write and you fail to rewrite, for example, you have a question on phrasal verbs, and then you're told write the following sentences while replacing the underlined words with the correct phrasal verbs. But instead of writing the entire statement, you just write the phrasal verb itself down there. You have not followed the instructions. Your answer is correct, but you'll not score for failure to follow instructions. If the question says write, please ensure you do exactly that. Rewrite. If the question says fill in the gaps, do exactly that. Don't underline. Sometimes you're given a question where you're given alternatives or like a multiple choice in brackets at the end. And then you're told fill in the blank spaces with the most suitable alternative from those given in brackets. But instead of getting the answer from the bracket and filling the blank space, a student goes and underlines where the answer is. You have answered the question yes, but you have not followed the instructions. So you will not score. All the marks will go. So students don't fail in grammar because they don't know. They fail because of those actually small mistakes that can be avoided. Earlier on, I said that you're going to look at commonly examinable grammar topics, and these are just but a few. I'm not saying that these are the only grammar topics that are examinable. I'm just saying that these are commonly examinable, and they are just but a few that I have sampled. The first one, hardly will you miss a question on the right. We are told to write the following sentences according to instructions given after each. Mostly 3, 4, or 5 marks. So learn to follow the instructions. So rewrite questions mostly cover topics on direct and indirect speech, passive and active voice, inversion, conjunctions, etc. Then we also have questions on question tags. We are told to rewrite the sentence while providing the most suitable question tag. Case in pronouns, subjective and objective cases, prepositions, simple and complex prepositions, phrasal verbs and idiomatic expressions. That is also very common. Word derivation. Word derivation is another, just like rewrite, another section that never misses. We are told fill in the blank spaces using the correct form of the word in brackets. So you're given a word in bracket, the base form of the word in bracket, and then you derive the most appropriate word that you can use to fill in the blank space. That's what we call word derivation or word formation. And then we also have gender sensitive language. You're given a sentence and then you're supposed to make the sentence gender sensitive or remove the gender bias. So those are just but a few topics that are highly examinable in the grammar section. So this is what we had for today's session. If this is your first session to see, please subscribe and check for our first section on question number 1 and question number 2 of how to tackle English paper 2 questions. See you and have a blessed day.